think that, and I hope that I did this, that he would want people to understand that he was more than, a fighter. He was more than, he was definitely more than an addict. And that, he had a very deep and philosophical perspective on life and family, and that choices that he made were not always indicative of the depth that he carried, if that makes sense. He was a really good writer, and I had people who actually saved his writing that from high school on that had like one person, a friend, saw him throw his English notebook into the trash and pulled it out and kept it. And so, so I included a lot of his writing in the book, like his epigraphs at the top of chapters, and to just really try and bring more of him and his presence. So I hope that he would feel like, even though it's a hard book and he made a lot of really bad choices, because of this addiction, and he tried so hard to be in a long-term recovery with it. But I hope that he would feel like his real presence came through.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Living the Next Chapter. I have an author here today, and if you love boxing, if there's a boxer in your family and boxing is your thing, I have an author here today that's going to share a great story about a relative who lived the life of a boxer, had amazing training, was a very renowned boxer trainer as well. And Janet Hurley's here today. We're going to be talking about Glove Shy, new book. Janet, welcome to the podcast. Nice to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me, Dave.
It's exciting to have you here. Let's share with everybody off the bat where you are in this big world of ours.
Well, I live currently in Asheville, North Carolina, in the Blue Ridge Mountains.
Nice. Beautiful. That sounds like a beautiful place. Every time I hear somebody talk about the Blue Ridge Mountains, it just sounds like, oh, such a nice place to be. It's amazing there.
It is. These mountains are, I think, the oldest mountains in the world.
Wow.
And so they're very worn down. Doesn't mean that we don't have high peaks, but they're very comforting in that way.
Nice. Beautiful. Okay, so let's talk about your book right off the bat. Let's jump right in. Glove Shy, a new book just came out. And we were talking before we record, you just did your first book launch party where you got to meet with readers and family and friends from your community about the book. This is an amazing idea to have a launch party. Tell me about the party, what happened, and what was exciting for you as an author once people started coming through the doors to meet with you and talk about the book.
Well, the launch party, there were two parts to it. One was actually at our great independent bookstore here in Asheville called Malaprops. And they create really wonderful spaces for authors of great renown nationally, internationally, and then authors like myself who have just published their first book. And they make all of us feel really super special. And so at my book launch at the store, we set it up as a conversation between myself and another author, Sebastian Matthews. Sebastian is also a great artist and author, and he does a lot of teaching. And back in 2003, I took a class from him in creative nonfiction and started writing some pieces that eventually led to me getting into this memoir about my brother. And so through all the years, we've maintained a friendship. He ended up blurbing the book for me. He's really familiar with me as well as the story. So he and I met ahead of time and we talked about different entries into a conversation about the book and questions. And he asked me what I didn't want him to ask, and then what I did want him to ask. And then when we got to the actual evening, we just really, I think because we're pretty comfortable with each other, but I really wanted the whole evening to feel really comfortable to everyone. So we spent most of the time either in conversation with each other or inviting questions from the audience. We saved probably half an hour for questions from the audience that also included Zoom participation.
Nice.
So we had it was a hybrid event and we had people from all over the country on there. I'm really lucky that I have good friends who live around the country, and in fact, good friends in El Salvador who got online to participate.
Oh, nice.
And so we went back and forth between the audience that was there in front of us and the folks who were sending in questions. And it was a really fun event. And some of the questions I had sort of expected, and then some were unexpected and got a little more deeper into sort of intention behind the book, and then what I hoped I might carry forward from the book in terms of actions I might take, that kind of thing. So,
nice.
So it was good.
Anything after the fact, everything's all done, you're packing up to go back home, and you're like, oh, I really kind of wish we would have done this. Was there anything that kind of stood out in that, and you're like, for my next one, I'm definitely going to add this part to a book signing or a book launch party?
I think maybe one being, of course, I used a lot of publicity material that the bookstore had prepared, and they had information, of course, on their website. And then I sent out my own email marketing. I kind of wish that I had said, it said there would be this conversation with Sebastian, who's also well known, but I think I would have encouraged people ahead of time to think of questions, to feel comfortable in asking questions. I think that by the time that energy picks up with questions in a room, you're sort of towards the latter end of the time you have available.
Right. Yeah. Because everyone's like, who's going to ask the first question? I don't know what I want to ask. I don't want to, right. Kind of this beginning stages. You're like, someone, please, let's get I love that your idea of near the end of it. You're right. It kind of, the audience kind of kicks in and the questions start ramping up. You're like, I need that at the beginning. It's a good point.
Yeah, and we had invited a lot of the folks who were there back to our house just for a celebration, sort of launch party celebration. And then there were folks who came in and I was able to have much longer conversations. So that was helpful. And, we don't have a huge house, so we weren't able to invite everybody that came to the event. But, maybe in the future, I would think about a space where folks could gather afterwards.
Yeah.
The bookstore is not that space, but it's so iconic in Asheville, this bookstore, that I wanted to be able to be there specifically. I'd written an article for one of our state magazines about malaprops. I mean, I had a lot of connection to it, but I think in the future I'd find a space where people could get more in depth with their conversations.
Amazing. And the one thing you were talking about too was signing people's books for them at this event. and how that felt for you as an author. What do you write in the book of maybe somebody that you don't know very well, not family or friends, but someone who comes up and says, "Can you sign my book?" And you don't really know them. What would you write in there from an author's perspective to inspire that new reader?
That is very interesting. That was for that. I had not thought about this at all. I've had books signed by authors. You know, they've asked me, "Oh, is this for you? Is this for somebody else?" And I realized as people made a line with their books for me to sign, and some of them I knew really well, and so I thought, oh, I'm going to mention something that connects me to that person, that I'm so glad that they're engaged in this journey with me, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then that took a long time. And there were people waiting in the line that were, kind of like, okay, is she going to write a long thing for everybody,
Yeah.
And so I in the end, for the folks I didn't know well, and they would give me their name, and I would say, thanks for including Glove Shy in your reading journey, or I love that word, journey, obviously.
Yeah.
And then that would be it. But I'm not very satisfied with that particular signing. And so I'm really thinking about it. I have other readings coming up. I'm going to be in Cambridge at Lesley University for their 20th anniversary of their MFA program. That's where I went.
Yeah.
And so before I do that, and before I head back up to my hometown in New York later in the summer, I want to get that figured out, because it's actually important.
Yeah. You don't know who that reader is. You don't know what that book's going to do to inspire them, or meeting you might inspire them to write a book. You might be that person that you looked up to for them. Right. So in that moment, you are the person that they want to meet, and they want a little piece of your time. And that's nice. It's got to be a rewarding feeling as an author as well, to write a book and put it out in the world, and then people line up to speak to you and interact with you as an author. That's got to be like a little bit of a surreal moment, I would think, as an author.
Yeah, for the folks who know me, they were aware that I was working on this, although not that many people were very close into the process. It's a surreal moment in that our relationship then is going to expand, because they'll read this book and they'll learn so much more, not just about me, but also just sort of how my perspective and thoughts and, all of that sort of thing. And so there's that. And then for folks who are standing there with a book that I don't know at all, it feels like I'm excited for them, because they'll be able to participate with the book without knowing me. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so it's surreal. The Glove Shy touches on a lot of things. It's about my brother, who was an amateur fighter, and Floyd Patterson, who was a world heavyweight champion in the 50s, 60s, had retired to my hometown, opened up a gym, and formed a boxing club for young fighters. My brother went up there and was immediately, just enthralled, and became Floyd's protege. And while he was in high school, and received a lot of notice, had a lot of local celebrity. And so, the book kind of follows my fangirl time with my brother. And then my brother also struggled with a lot of depression, mental health issues, which then led to a lot of substance abuse, drug addiction. And so it covers a lot about family response to, and it could be to any sort of trauma, but in this case, it's addiction. And then sort of my looking back and my reckoning with lots of choices that I made, the impact on me, and the choices my family made, the choices my brother made before he died, that kind of thing. So there are lots of entry points. I mean, for folks who love boxing, there are people who just, and that was a question, what was it like to watch your brother in the ring?
Yeah.
What was it like to, to meet Floyd Patterson, to be around that as a little girl, that kind of thing. But then there were folks who asked me, what do I see as my role when it comes to issues, policies, the social narrative around addiction? And so that was an interesting question. I am going to be doing at least one book reading at a 2-year residential substance abuse rehab program in Winston-Salem. They've started in Durham, have been around a long time. They've just opened up a new place in Winston-Salem in North Carolina. So they asked me to come and do a book event there.
Nice.
And so hopefully I'll be doing something in Durham as well. But that was really important to me as well, to be able to, and the book event in Durham hopefully will be a fundraiser for them. Just really to be, aware that there are parts of this book that will really speak to both people who are dealing with substance abuse and family members of those folks too. So, yeah.
Okay. So as an author, when you're writing about your brother, Brian, like, how much of you as an author do you put into the story? Or are you wrestling between just telling Brian's story through your recollection of what you saw as a family member as he went through all this? How much of yourself do you put into the story? I'm trying to kind of see the balance there as from your perspective as an author.
Well, with this memoir, I'm very much present throughout. One of the things that I got really clear about from the beginning is that I did not, ethically feel that it was fair to my brother that I not also share a lot of my own substance abuse challenges. And, my own recovery. So that is also part of the book. It was part of my reckoning after he died. And so, I had some early readers who said that maybe I should just focus on my brother's story, even, with me involved in it, and leave it there. But I felt like that was really incomplete because, my relationship with him, even after he died, was what led to my own recovery. And so so he was present, in other words. So he was part of my story, just as I was part of his story.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And the other thing about a memoir that is challenging is that, everything that I could ascertain through like journals and letters, public records and newspaper clippings and interviews with people who knew him were so important to me, because it provides this kind of grounding for me and for the reader. It also let me discover things about my brother that I didn't know, because who knows somebody else all the way, right?
Yeah.
And so when I went and interviewed the fighters that were part of the club that he was involved with, they were all amateur fighters. Some of them went pro after. They just provided stories that I had not heard. And there was a big conflict between my brother and Floyd Patterson when my brother was a senior in high school that really impacted him. And it was important to me to talk to people who were there to understand more about it. Floyd and Brian, maintained their relationship. There's a lot that I did not know about that maintained relationship that happened afterwards that I discovered through folks. So, there was a lot of surprise points for me, even in public records. And it also helped me build a timeline. Sometimes I would just have all the newspaper clippings, the public records, all of it would be on the floor and in a timeline, trying to make sure that I was grounding things that were happening. Yeah.
What do you think the most important part of this book would be to Brian, if he was able to kind of comment on the book and be at this book signing? And imagine that for a moment. What do you think Brian would want people to understand about his story through Gloveshy?
That's a good question. I think that, and I hope that I did this, that he would want people to understand that he was more than, a fighter.
Yeah.
He was more than, he was definitely more than an addict. And that, he had a very deep and philosophical perspective on life and family, and that choices that he made were not always indicative of the depth that he carried, if that makes sense. He was a really good writer, and I had people who actually saved his writing that from high school on that had, like one person, a friend, saw him throw his English notebook into the trash and pulled it out and kept it.
Oh, wow.
And so I included a lot of his writing in the book, like his epigraphs at the top of chapters, and to just really try and bring more of him and his presence. So I hope that he would feel like, even though it's a hard book and he made a lot of really bad choices, because of this addiction, and he tried so hard to be in a long-term recovery with it. But I hope that he would feel like his real presence came through.
During the editing process of the book, was there any stories that you removed from the book and you're like, oh, but it's still a great story and I'd love to share this part? That would be kind of an addendum to the book. Anything that you could share with us?
Oh my gosh. There are so many, so many stories. And that is the challenge of writing a memoir, right? So many stories that I remembered, and also that people told me that just did not make it in there, because nobody has 10 years to read a book about somebody.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
That kind of thing. But specifically, there were some things that My brother was, even as a young person, he had this really very keen sense of like justice, I guess, and fairness. And there is a story in there of him sort of standing up to a neighborhood bully who then later his dad gets him like a pair of boxing gloves or several sets, and then neighbors would go in and they sort of learned as little kids to fight. I think that was that kid's dad's approach to his bully son, right? But there was another kid who lived next door who had really mistreated my younger sister, and he was just sort of a classic. He was kind of one of those classic bullies who really had a lot of fear. And my brother, we all played hide and seek at night in the dark, and it was a big neighborhood thing. And my brother created this plan with everybody except this kid that ended up showing the kid just, it really sort of exposed a lot of his insecurities, and maybe it was mean, but I think it was also Brian's like wanting to empower my little sister and empower other kids that have been bullied by this guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I had to cut that. It was just a lengthy thing. It involved, he actually created this life-size body, like, with a shirt and stuff, and then stuck a knife in its heart with blood.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And hid it in the woods so that as we were playing hide and seek, he pretended to discover it. And then we were all playing our parts and being very afraid. And then this kid was like the most afraid. Yeah. And it was very dramatic and creative, I guess. And maybe mean. But it's a story that, just didn't make it into the book.
So it sounds like Brian was somebody who looked out for others around him that he cared about as well.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I do have numerous points in the book that I put that in there. Yeah.
So how old was Brian when we lost Brian?
Brian was 32.
Wow.
Yeah. So he was pretty young.
Yeah.
And he did make a comeback attempt. He did go pro, or wanted to go pro. There were some folks in the boxing world. If you are good enough, there will be people who want to invest in you so you have time to train. And so there were people who were interested in that. And he was on the undercard for a big professional fight in Albany, but was unable to fight because in most states there are licensing requirements, and he did not pass his CAT scan or whatever. Yeah. And there's a lot of studies about addiction and the impact on our brains. So
boxing has to be brutal to your body as well. Like that's, the body's only meant to receive so much damage over a period of time, and boxing is not an easy sport on your body, I would think. So there's got to be that part of his story as well that's really, really difficult for him in that kind of sport. It's not like golf, where you're just golfing and your body doesn't really have that kind of damage. But being in the ring like that and watching some of the fights, and you're just like, how do these people survive? Like, it's amazing what their bodies go through. So it must be for you watching him box, where you would feel for him as a a family member watching him in there going, oh my gosh, like that's not, can't be good, right? So talk a little bit about your feelings when you watched him box.
Well, when I was in my fangirl mode, I was 4 years younger, and I went to I can remember, and I talk about this, going to my first fight. I kind of quickly came up with my own rules for watching him fight. And they included, my mother spent most of his fights with her hands over her eyes, right? She didn't really watch. She just waited for us to tell her what was going on. But I quickly realized that it's always better to watch so that you know what's happening. I also decided that the blows that he would deliver were much more impactful than the blows that he received. Like, that was just how I worked it out. Like, even if that blow looked like it really hurt, it probably didn't hurt as much as the one that guy was going to receive. So that's how I kind of made it through. Then, with all of the challenges that he went through, I got a little frustrated, and then I became more frustrated with him. And some of his later fights, I felt like he wasn't as well prepared. And then it really bothered me. It was hard to watch. Yeah.
So the other side then is the addiction side to the book. Like, that's really important, I think, beyond the boxing, is to kind of complement, is for people that are struggling with addiction, how can this book kind of give them a light in their search to find a way out of their addictions? Can you kind of talk a little bit about that?
I think I'm not sure it's a book that's going to provide any sort of instruction or any sort of like pathway to dealing with one's addictions. It might provide more perspective on being a family member, loving someone with addiction. And the reason I say that is that I just know from my experience with my brother, and then my own recovery, and all the folks that I've known who have really suffered from addiction, that you just don't, it's really hard to predict. It's really hard to say, if you do X, Y, and Z,
right,
that you're going to make it out of this particular place. I mean, I've been clean and sober for 33 years now.
Wow.
But there's so many different factors that go in. But I would say the reason that I chose the title Glove Shy is a boxing term that is when somebody in the ring closes their eyes when they see a blow coming. And for me, it was a great metaphor for what happened with my family. And again, this was the 70s, right? I mean, nobody went to therapy, that kind of thing. My brother went to rehabs that were 1 month long, right? So there wasn't a lot of narrative that supported people actually looking straight at what was going on, or seeing addiction as a family situation, in terms of how it impacts everybody in a family. There was just beginning to talk about hereditary factors for addiction, and I really think it's important for folks not to be glove shy, to be able to not just look at what's happening, say, with someone that they love who's in this disease, but also just for themselves, like, how am I impacted? How am I reacting? What are the roles I'm playing here? That was something that I really had to look at along the way. I chose to go into a family program that was connected with a rehab center. But he wasn't at that rehab center. I did this, it was like a family program. It was a week long, just, looking at how families deal with addiction. And it was really critical for me. And that was even before I started dealing with my own substance abuse.
Well,
So, yeah.
So that's the one beauty part that I love, is that you do bring in your own story. That's amazing. And expanding on the glove shy definition, that really helps as well, because I think a lot of people in life do shut their eyes just before the blow hits. But if maybe in the boxing world and in life, if we keep our eyes open, there's a way to counter, there's a way to duck or move out of the way. And some of those hits won't land if our eyes are open and we're aware of our surroundings. And I think that's a good metaphor and a good example for life for all of us, is to be aware, right? And not to shut down or shut our eyes or try to avoid what's going to happen in life, but address it and, focus on it and survive. I guess that's kind of what the story of the book is then. Yeah.
Yeah. There's so many ways in which that applies to, situations. Just kind of, if you're stepping forward into, awareness, or even, not being reactive, like you were just saying, maybe stepping aside, or sometimes there's just energy that you can let go by you, that's not good for your life, right? I mean, there's just so many ways, but I think for a lot of families who are challenged with this situation, that, a lot of things, the stakes are very high, right? And so it really provokes fear and anger, and then there's reaction from that. And it's challenging.
It's amazing. Janet, thank you for making time to be on the podcast. Let's tell everybody where to find you. And obviously the book is available online. I did ask everyone that buys the book to please leave a review wherever you're shopping. If you're on Amazon, for example, leave a review, tell everybody about the book. It really does help our authors to promote their books. But Jenna, where do we go to first connect with you? Like, where you're most active online? And where do we find the book? Where should we go?
Well, I am on Instagram under Glove Shy. That's my handle on Instagram, which I chose 10 years ago, or whenever Instagram first came on the scene, so I could follow my children.
Nice. Wow.
But now it's really helpful. So they can find me there. And also, my website is janet.hurley.me.
Okay, good.
And my email is janet@janethurley.me.
Nice.
And I'd love to, hear from folks. And another place to find the book would be, you could order it from a local independent bookseller.
That's better, yes.
Or you can go on to bookshop.org, which is another excellent online place to get the book. And also they contribute to independent booksellers.
That sounds awesome. Yeah. Yes. Great place to buy the books. That's a great way to do that. So one last thing, Janet, for anyone picking up this book, who would this be a good gift for? because maybe I would like to gift this to somebody and have this book arrive on their front door. Who should I have in mind, or who would be the best person that I could send this book to?
That is a good question. I think there are a good number of folks who would like the book. First of all, I think people who enjoy good literature. The book is kind of a woven structure, and I think anyone who enjoys good writing will enjoy that. There is a lot of description of boxing and kind of a peek into that world. So folks who are interested or curious would also like that. And that kind of goes throughout the book. Folks who are also, we just talked about addiction, right? So folks who might have struggled with that as well. And anybody who is considering writing a memoir, I think that it offers a chance to look at how you might combine some interviews, do some journalistic work, look for public records, newspaper, all of that, and then how you weave those in as well. So
nice.
Quite a few folks.
Amazing. So that's a great idea. So it's gift giving season coming up. June is a Father's Day thing happening.
Yeah.
So a great way to send that off to a dad or someone that you know would love this. Please consider that as an option. But Janet, thank you so much for being part of the podcast. It's great to meet you. And we have a fellow friend in common, Hannah from Spellbound Public Relations, has helped us make all this happen. So I just wanted to say hello to Hannah as well. So great to have you on the podcast, Janet. And I hope the book does very, very well, and that you get many more opportunities to sign those books and have the best saying possible as you sign each copy. So
yeah, thank you so much, Dave. It was a real delight to be here. I
Awesome.
appreciated all of your questions.
Amazing. So go check out the show notes, everyone. All the links that we talked about are there. And again, go support Janet with a review when you buy her book as well. So thank you, Janet.
Thank you.
Thanks for being part of the podcast again. Appreciate you investing time in the show, and if you're listening this far, thank you. One thing to keep in mind is we are looking for help and some support for the podcast. If you are able to help support our show, our little podcast show here, we can go over to livingthenextchapter.com, and all the instructions will be there to help support the show. It takes about $30 to $40 a month to do this, just for the hosting and all of that other stuff that we pay for. But if the show is giving you any value and you're enjoying what's happening here, would love any kind of support that you can offer. That would be great. And you being here and sharing the show helps us grow. Helps us get great new authors on the show, connect with other listeners, and build community. So whatever you can do to share this show today, I really appreciate it. Thank you for being here for Living the Next Chapter, and I can't wait to share the next one with you. Talk soon. Have a great day.